Benjamin Richard Sheen, member of the Royal Corps of Signals. I served for 6.5 years, 2.5 years in Dover, where I was 20 years old. I was posted to Dover November of 1939. And later on I went to Normandy and landed on Juno Beach, not on D-Day, thank goodness, shortly after. There was a small detachment in Dover Castle. We worked in the gun control room there, 70 feet below the castle. When the Germans first took over France and the northern coast, they actually had an easy run through. Consequently, our army, 400,000 men, were trapped in Dunkirk. The problem was there was only a small jetty. They were able to get some of the men, but obviously being the large ships, they couldn't get into the beach. Operation Dynamo was, I think, one of the main epics of the war, and I think it was certainly a turning point. I happened to be with a couple of the chaps walking along the front of Dover, and it was a very quiet, peaceful sort of evening. The sea was like a mill pond, and we could literally hear the battle going on. You could hear the explosions, you could hear the shells being fired. We were saying, oh, things are getting pretty close. Well, the few days after, I could hear quite a lot of noise, and I got up to look out the window. It was almost like magic, and the whole harbour was full of little ships, and they were manned by elderly men, boys, but at least they were able to get onto the beaches in Dunkirk and transport the soldiers onto the larger ships. Quite astonishing, really. But of course, all the time they were being dive-bombed by these Junkers 87s. In the gun control room, we were very busy. Our job was to make sure that we were keeping a good lookout for any enemy aircraft which were approaching, the numbers of aircraft, the height, direction, and so forth, ready to engage. We went down to helping the soldiers off the ships. Churchill wanted to get them away as soon as possible, so they were off the ships, straight on the trains and away, because they were afraid that, if the Germans didn't get them in Dunkirk, they'd get them in Dover or Folkestone or somewhere like that. They reckon 1 out of 4 was left behind, but in all they rescued 388,000 soldiers. Without that army that was saved, we were virtually devoid of any sort of defence. And Vice Admiral Ramsey was the major person who brought back all the soldiers, really. And then, of course, the Battle of Britain started, and it was like a war zone there. I mean, you wouldn't believe it, but it was like a film, especially when these Junkers 87s used to come and dive bomb the harbour, and there was a submarine base in which they were after, and they literally used to go past our window, and being right on the edge of the cliff, it wasn't too healthy. The RAF started putting up barrage balloons, and then the Germans used to have a lot of fun. The fighters would come over and start shooting all the balloons down. But this particular evening, there was one balloon left. There was one saucy devil. He came shooting along to shoot it down. So everything in the harbour let loose, everybody was having a go at it. Anyway, he shot the balloon down, and then he made out that he'd been hit, and he got to sea level, flattened out, shot back across to France. And I bet they had a good old laugh when they got over there, these German airmen. And if it hadn't been for Operation Dynamo, I think we'd been in a different situation than we are today. And can you imagine that, I can't imagine that.